Hello everyone, I am back for part 2 of getting to know patient 1. I feel like that's probably what I'm gonna title it because I think it's funny when I have these conversations with my doctor and I'm known as like patient 1 in the trial. Yeah, so getting to know who patient 1 is. Um, so this video is going to be some more medical questions, and I know the first video I had was like all around the medicine and the medical part of things, but I guess it would be more interesting to know about my history specifically with sickle cell disease and things like that. So yeah, I have a few questions that again I just thought of that people might want to know. First one is when and how I was diagnosed. So I was diagnosed when I was a baby, and the way I was diagnosed is through those newborn screening tests, and it essentially is a blood test, I believe. And the time that I was born, a lot of African American children were being tested for sickle cell disease. Although sickle cell disease does not only affect Black children, it could affect people of all ethnicities, but it's just more common in Black people. I guess it was a common thing for doctors to do that test for Black children and Black newborns, but now I think everyone has the same newborn screening test, I believe. I might have to insert a little information just to make sure that's sure, but I think now that specific blood test that looks for sickle cell disease is being done on all newborns now, but that's how I found out. The second thing I thought you guys might want to know is what kind of sickle cell disease I have, because I'm not sure if that is known by a lot of people, but there are different kinds of sickle cell disease. I have sickle cell disease SS, that is the most common, and the second most common, I believe, is sickle cell disease SC. So what SS, that just stands for the kind of hemoglobin in your body. So because both of my parents had the sickle cell trait, they both passed down a sickled hemoglobin to me, which is the SS, stands for sickled hemoglobin. And then for patients who have sickle cell disease SC, it's because they have been passed down a sickled hemoglobin from one parent and then a C hemoglobin from another parent. And the C hemoglobin is just an abnormal kind of hemoglobin. But yeah, SS is usually the most severe, going along with the most common. It is usually the most severe. It has the most side effects. But SC, I know, can also have just as severe side effects. I'm guessing it's just dependent on the person, but it's usually known as less severe. And SS severe, SC less severe. But it depends on each person, of course. It's different for everyone. What were my main symptoms? So hold on, let me read off the main symptoms of sickle cell disease really quickly, and then I will tell you what my main symptoms. So the number one main symptom is anemia, and the symptoms that go under anemia is fatigue, dizziness, headaches, cold hands and feet, jaundice, and unusually pale skin. So that's the first symptom, is anemia. And the second one, of course, are the pain crises. So those pain crises are vaso-occlusive crises that can occur anywhere in the body. Wherever your sickle cells are blocking a blood vessel, that's essentially where you can have the pain crises. And other issues that patients can have, or other symptoms patients can have with sickle cell disease, is pulmonary hypertension, acute chest syndrome, risk of stroke, leg ulcers, a swollen spleen, organ failure or organ damage. So there's quite a bit of symptoms that sickle cell patients can experience, but the main symptoms that I experienced were acute chest syndrome. I had that when I was a kid though, and I think it's most common in children, and I had that once, maybe twice. Another symptom that I had when I was a child were swollen legs, and I had that during my first pain crisis when I was 1 year old, and jaundice. My eyes were always yellow, sometimes even more so when I was having a vaso-occlusive crisis or a pain crisis. And of course the final and the main symptom I had were the pain crises. those were the things that were bothering me the most. Luckily, I've never had a stroke. I don't have any organ damage. I am asplenic though, but my spleen is kind of just there. It doesn't really have any function right now, and I never had it removed. So that's one thing. And yeah, I'm pretty lucky and blessed to not have had any of the really severe symptoms, because I don't really have any permanent damage in my body because of the sickle cells. And I know that's not the case for everybody. There's a lot of permanent damage that can happen. I think I remember one of them being like permanent hip damage or damage to my hip bone. I can't remember the name of it right now. Or permanent damage to your spine and the bones in your lower back, just because those cells are just eating away at the tissue because there's no blood flow or blood circulation happening there. But yeah, that is the reason why I think I was considered like a healthy patient, like healthy besides the fact that I had sickle cell disease, is because I didn't have any real permanent damages, thank goodness. Yeah, so those are my main symptoms. The main reasons why I wanted to do this trial. There's a few reasons. I think the main thing was initially the pain crises. That was the main thing initially. But I think it's really how the pain crises started to affect my life. My quality of life was starting to change. I feel like I was having a harder time going about day-to-day life. It was to the point where my pain was daily, and it was chronic pain, even though it wasn't the most severe pain in the world, and it wasn't debilitating pain. I still was having pain every day, and I still needed to go to the ER pretty frequently, at least once a month. And I think while doing the trial and figuring out if I was eligible, I got to the point where I needed around 5 hospitalizations a year, and I needed frequent ER visits in between those hospitalizations. So it was a lot of time that I was spending in the hospital, that I was spending in the ER, and outside of that, I had like 1 to 2 appointments in the clinic. They were telehealth though, because this all started in 2020 during the pandemic. So I had a bunch of telehealth appointments weekly, and it just started to get to the point where 24/7 all I was thinking about was the fact that I had sickle cell, or the fact that I had pain, and how to go about my day and push through because of that. So that was the main reason why I wanted to go through with this trial. Well, I guess that's another thing I should bring up too. Like, I guess another thing that goes under the quality of life thing is that I just noticed that I started to think about my future differently. I started to really limit myself in the things that I would be able to do. I wasn't really working around that time, so I was starting to think, will I ever be able to work? Will I be able to have a consistent full-time job if I need to go to the ER this often, if I have all these appointments I need to attend, if I have these really long hospital stays, will I really be able to work? Will I be able to work in the way that I want to? And I just I needed to reframe what my future looked like, and that was really hurtful to have to do that, because I had these big dreams. You know, when you're a kid, you have these big dreams, especially when you're in college, and I felt like that was all kind of slipping away, and I had no control over it. Yeah, so it was really affecting my quality of life. And the second thing that was really bothering me, and the reason why I wanted to go through this trial, was as I was growing up in this space, in the clinic, in the hospital, the racial disparities in healthcare were starting to become so clear to me. Like, the implicit bias, the racial bias I was starting to experience was really taking a toll on my mental health. I had a really dangerous and unprofessional experience when I was hospitalized in LA. I started to be questioned a lot about my medications. It was a lot to experience, and I was going to the ER so often, but I often avoided the ER because I knew the care that I would get would not be sufficient. And most of the time I wouldn't even go to a local hospital just because I know I would be questioned and that they would pretty much just try to invalidate my pain and tell me what amount of medication I needed, and it often was never enough. Instead, they would rather see me suffer than give me the medication that I need to help me recover. I wasn't listened to at all, and even when it came to other things outside of my pain, I wasn't listened to in how how should I word this? I wasn't listened to because a lot of medical healthcare professionals would often assume they know better than I know better, even though I've been living in this body for 24 years now and I've had to deal with my pain crisis for years now. They would think they would know what's best for me rather than just listening to me and understanding how I'm trying to explain to them what I need and how I'm feeling. I was invalidated a lot, and every time my mom would agree with me on this, it was a fight every single time I was in the ER to get the adequate care. It was a fight every time to try to get a nurse or a doctor who didn't know me before to understand what I needed so I could feel relief. It was just a fight, and I feel like I think I do want to make another video with my mom about the racial disparities in healthcare, because the way I experienced it as an adult, it was just so eye-opening, because as I was growing older, it was just becoming more apparent, and it was becoming more of a battle. It was so exhausting mentally and physically, needing to go to the ER and the hospital as frequently as I did. So those were the two main reasons why I wanted to go through the trial, because it was just not worth it to have to live like that forever. It was not worth it to have to go through that forever. It was a lot of turmoil mentally. It was a lot of fighting, a lot of advocating for myself in situations where a lot of the time I couldn't even speak. I literally would be in so much pain I could not speak. So how am I supposed to advocate for myself if I'm in so much pain that I can't talk? And that's where my mom would come in, and my mom did a great job of advocating for herself, but it's just that it got to a point, where we had to react calmly, because we already knew what they were thinking, and we already knew what would happen if we were to really get angry or stand up for ourselves, or stand up for me. I guess my mom was standing up for me. Yeah, but that's a whole nother topic that I can make a video about with my mom that I'm thinking that I want to do. So yeah, those were the main reasons why I wanted to be part of this trial. I just needed my life to go differently than in the direction it was heading. I didn't like what I was feeling and seeing and experiencing, and it was on my mind 24/7. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't escape the ER. I couldn't escape the appointments. I couldn't escape the hospital. It was just all around me all the time, and it was very tiring. Okay, another thing I thought you guys might want to know. What was the hardest part of being in the trial? So for me, the hardest part of being in the trial was definitely having to do the chemotherapy. I think it was sugar-coated a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, because it was only one kind of chemo medication. I think the consensus was that I shouldn't really be affected by it, that it's only one type and you should be fine, you're pretty healthy. They were like, you might lose your hair, but you might not. And I was like, am I gonna lose my eyebrows? No, you're not gonna lose your eyebrows. This was all gone. This was not here. I had lost everything, and I got really sick. I was really, really sick, and throwing up a lot and nauseous a lot, and just having a lot of nosebleeds and issues with that bleeding was just every day, and it was consistent for most of the hospital stay. I think I had, even the nosebleeds were crazy. There was one day where I had a nosebleed for, I think, 4 hours. It was, no. Was it 4 hours? I think I'll put in right here where it was. But it was a nosebleed that was hours long. It was just tough. That was the hardest part, was having to go through those chemo side effects. Yeah, that was the one thing, to be real. That was really hard. I don't see how cancer patients do it. That chemo is rough. Goodness gracious. The easiest part of the trial. Definitely the easiest part The trial was the initial screening and the test, because all I had to do was like a pulmonary function test, some blood tests. I had to do an MRI. I had to do an X-ray, EKG, stuff like that. Just a bunch of little tests. I might even say that doing apheresis once every 3 to 4 weeks wasn't that bad either. I think that might have been the easiest part as well, because it ended up not being as tiring to me, the process of apheresis, as I thought it would. So that was probably the easiest part of that. Yeah, apheresis. Yeah, but there are a lot of little parts of the trial that was hard too, and there were a lot of smaller parts of the trial that was easier than I thought it would be. So there's just a lot to explain, and I think I might continue to go into depth about the small things and the big things. Yeah, and I think I could also even talk a little bit more about how like I guess how my condition kind of ebbed and flowed throughout my whole life, because I had the transplant done when I was 23. So from the time I was 1 to 23 years old, my pain crises were like this. Because in elementary school, I felt like I was in the hospital and struggling with pain crises often. I believe it was often. I remember it happening maybe at least once a year. But then by the time I got to middle school, I was doing pretty good and I was fine. And in high school, I was good and I wasn't really sick very often. But then that again changed junior year, and suddenly junior/senior year, I'm in the ER once a month for a pain crisis. And then that kind of leveled out and died down, and I go to school and I'm a freshman in college and everything's going fine. I'm still having pain. I'm still having to go to the ER maybe well, not the ER, excluding the ER. I'm needing to go to the hospital maybe twice a year. It's not too bad. And then all of a sudden again, my senior year, things changed again when I was in college. So my whole life, it kind of ebbed and flowed. It wasn't like I was struggling with all this pain all the time my whole life. It kind of ebbed and flowed. And the main thing that was different this time around when I was 20, 21 years old is that I had noticed that my pain had changed. So initially my pain was very squeezing and pressing pain. Like, it always felt like someone had a giant rubber band around my ribs and they would just squeeze. And if I took a breath in, it would squeeze even more. It just felt tight and restricting. But that changed. It changed in 2019. It started to become a pulsating pain, and it didn't go to my heartbeat, but it was like a pulse. A little hydro something band-aid. But it was like a pulse. But with every pulse, there was sharp pain all over my body, like just knives all going into my body at the same time that the pulses would happening. So it was like my whole body would contract. And that pain, it was more severe and it was harder to control than the pain I was used to experiencing when I was younger. So that, on top of having to deal with like the implicit bias in the ER, it's like, it was terrible because the pain was worse than before, and it was harder to control than before, and things were just getting out of hand. Things weren't manageable for me, and for my pain crisis. The medications I was taking started to not work as well, and the new medications that I had been offered weren't really working at all. So there was no option for me besides a transplant. It started to get to that point as well. Another reason why I went through with this trial. The pain was just different, and it felt like it was evolving and changing and getting more severe, and it was becoming more frequent. And it went from usually being in my back. Most of my pain crises were in my back when I was younger. But then when I was in college, it would be my back and both my legs. Or it would be my back and both my arms, or one arm and one leg. Like, it started to spread. So it was just a lot of changes happening, and I thought it was time to really seek out a cure, because the other options for treatment just weren't working, and they weren't helping. So yeah, that's ultimately why I made the decision I did, and that's kind of what I wanted this video to be about, more on the medical side of me personally, what I had to experience, what my pain crises were like. Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about that. Wanted you guys to get to know patient one on the medical side of things, what I had to go through, and you know, the things that I had to overcome to get to the place that I'm in right now. But I will continue to post more videos and talk more about it, because there's still a lot more to say. Hopefully my videos aren't too redundant, because I might go back to other things I've said before and expand on that. But yeah, I just wanted you guys to get to know me a little bit more, and I hope you guys did. I had a lot of fun recording this one, actually. I had a lot of fun recording the last one too. I like doing these. It helps a lot to document. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. See you guys soon. Bye.